Hi, everyone. Welcome to the GoldFish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, 2019. This is our 406th GoldFish Report and our week 147 POTUS Report. I'm in a different location. There's a little bit of echo, so I'm not going to talk as much as I usually do because of the echo. But doing this with me and joining me again is my esteemed colleague, my friend, and of course, the most dangerous mind in America, the Fetz. How are you, Jim?
Oh, terrific, terrific, Louisa. The impeachment effort by the Democrats is falling completely apart. It's going to prove just as disastrous for them as did the hearings in Congress when Robert Mueller demonstrated he didn't know his own report, never heard of fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson. It was a catastrophe. I think we're seeing catastrophe 2.0.
Well, you know, you're right, Jim. And this week on the GoldFish Report blog is West Wing Reads. We have that published from the White House. And as you indicate, I'm just going to read a quote from there. It says, Democrat Representative Adam Schiff isn't a constitutional scholar, but he is playing one on impeachment TV. His latest gambit is an attempt to redefine bribery in the Constitution to include President Trump's behavior towards Ukraine. Of course, he's wrong about the law and constitutional history. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. The Trump administration took two huge steps toward improving American health care on Friday. Just about every person in the U.S. has had an experience of confusion, frustration, anger, and sometimes severe financial distress due to the bureaucracy and sheer obscurity of health care pricing. So with these two rules, the Trump administration is trying to provide the price signals and other information necessary for patients to be informed. That's according to the Washington Examiner. And the big problem is that you go into an emergency room and you have no idea what it's going to cost. Or treatment or anything else, you have no idea in advance. So you can't really shop around and get second opinions or do, what you like, and certainly be knowledgeable on what the cost of healthcare is going to be for you and what your options are. So anyway, there's been a lot going on with the White House. We know that the president was taken to the Walter Reed Medical Center over the weekend for an unscheduled visit to undergo a battery of tests, according to one report that was on Natural News. There are unconfirmed reports that it was possible that the president was poisoned. I did read a report stating that, and I believe this was Natural News reporting this, that the food tester is in gravely ill condition. I cannot confirm that, but according to the reports I've seen, this is what I've heard. Is this yet another assassination attempt on the president? Clearly, the Democrats are quite, I'm not accusing them, but I'm saying that they're quite desperate because they're failing in their attempt to persuade the country that Trump has done something wrong, illegal, unlawful, or impeachable. So there was some sort of, the report stated there was some sort of delayed release or time delayed chemical agent. And that, again, as I said, the food tester is gravely ill. Now, some people are reporting this as fake news, but I will screen share with you is a statement that was published today by the president's chief, his doctor. So here's the statement here. I'm going to screen share this for everybody. Okay, this is a memorandum released yesterday. Sorry, I can't really, let me see if I can close this up a little bit. I can't. Okay, a memorandum from the president's physician to the president from the White House. This was published, Stephanie Grisham, the White House press secretary, published this, and this is from the doctor. Okay, and now if you take a look at this, they confirm, in fact, this is what they're saying about it. Okay, the past Saturday afternoon, the president traveled up to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for a routine planned interim checkup as part of the regular primary preventative care he receives throughout the year. Due to scheduling uncertainties, the trip was kept off the record. So there's little suspicion there. After a little more than an hour of examination, labs, and discussion, the president took a brief tour of the hospital to visit with some of the medical staff, as well as speak with the family of a soldier undergoing surgery. After which he returned home to the White House. Despite some of the speculation, the president had not had any chest pain, nor was he evaluated or treated for any urgent or acute issues. Specifically, he did not undergo any specific cardiac or neurologic evaluations. A full summary of his labs and exam will be incorporated into next year's report, but the president has consented to me sharing that his total cholesterol is now 165, and with an HDL of 70, LDL of 84. You can read that. Primary preventative medical care is something that occurs continuously throughout the year. It is not just a single annual event. As such, I will continue to monitor the president's health, planning on a more comprehensive exam after the new year. So a reason I should screen share this is because there's been some misreporting on this. Of course, there's been so many assassination attempts on the president, and the mainstream media is not going to report on it, and they're not going to put out official statements on it. The White House, to my knowledge, has not put out one official statement regarding any of these. And it's really the business of, you know, the Secret Service to keep him protected, and they're not going to run to the press every time, you know, something happens. But, you know, why exactly they're not reporting it, I don't know, Jim. I don't know if it's really necessary that they report every single attempt. Do you?
It's in my stories, Louisa. I'll talk about.
Yeah, I saw that. But of course, this was a big story today. Of course, we all know, moving along, that the president also declared a national emergency, which we all know about South Dakota because of the weather. And the president also had a message on Antibiotic Awareness Week, talking about the importance of antibiotics and the importance of not to overuse and overprescribe the use of antibiotics, which will then become ineffective in treating infections. Also, the First Lady and the Second Lady volunteered to the Red Cross to help support our troops. There's photos of the week that are on the blog. You should go to the goldfishreport.blogspot.com and you'll see that. The president also awarded National Medal of Arts and National Humanitarian Medals. You can go to the blog. And as I said, I'm not in my usual office, so I'm traveling, and I'm a little bit limited to what I can screen share. So I'm, for the sake of time and not to complicate things technologically on location, I'm not going to screen share all of these, so I just want to direct you to go to the blog. There's also a statement from the press secretary, Jim, I know this is going to be in your slides as well, regarding the protests in Iran. The United States support the, this is a statement by the press secretary. Okay, sorry, I can't see. I have to take my glasses off. The United States supports the Iranian people in their peaceful protests against the regime that is supposed to lead them. I do believe that this is the deep state, the shadow government in Iran, not the actual government of Iran. Just like in the United States, we have a shadow government, a deep state that runs things in, for the dark, you know, in a nefarious manner. We condemn the lethal force and severe communication restrictions used against demonstrators. Tehran has fanatically pursued nuclear weapons and missile programs and supported terrorism, turning a proud nation into another cautionary tale of what happens when a ruling class abandons its people and embarks on a crusade for personal power and riches. And again, you have to understand that we're talking about a non-official faction of the government that runs the government, just like within the United States, because there was evidence that they were, you know, continuing to enrich uranium and pursue nuclear weapons. The second so then we move on to another point of, hold on a second. Wait, I'm sorry, folks, I have to interrupt for 1 second. Okay, so postpone before the computer shuts down. So another statement from the press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, regarding the second public hearing of Pelosi and Congressman Schiff's impeachment charade was useless and inconsequential at first. So there was no wrongdoing by the president. And I know, Jim, you probably have this in your slides as well. Folks, that's basically it. The president had another successful rally last week, and we have, of course, the long-awaited IG report. Michael Horowitz will be testifying about his findings in the investigation in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee on December 11th, folks. That is not a day you want to miss. About his investigation into the abuses of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So that's going to, and I think this IG now, Attorney General Barr has tweeted that the release of this report is imminent. What does that mean? Does that mean waiting until December 11th? That doesn't seem imminent to me, but imminent means that it looks like, and I think Sarah Carter had noted this as well in her tweets, that it looks like the report will be released first, and then he will testify on behalf of that. There still continues to be over 100 arrests made in Florida on human trafficking, and there's lots of things going on in terms of cracking down on human trafficking. And I think we are going to be, once we have this release, this FISA release, this report, and also what Huber was investigating, and that was the Clinton Foundation and crimes against children. I can assure you, folks, there's going to be criminal indictments, criminal referrals as a result of this, and there will be indictments and arrests, so be prepared for that. And also, the Daily Wire is reporting that Congress is cracking down on ABC News for the Jeffrey Epstein story, which was a revelation that came out last week from Project Veritas. Excellent reporting and undercover work exposing what was really happening, how the media killed these stories. Jim, it's just another week of political theater, my friend. And having said that, I will pass the baton to you, my friend, and I'll comment on your reports because they seem to be overlapping.
Absolutely. Well, you certainly hit the right note. The Democrats have gone all in on the Schiff impeachment. It's turning into a Schiff show. Unconstitutional, no crimes, only far-left Democrat support. Really stunning. There are no crimes President Trump has committed that could lead to an impeachment inquiry, so Schiff continues to move the goalposts. Most importantly, only far-left Democrats are in favor of impeachment. No matter how far you may seek to bend the truth, it still remains the truth. The Democrats are learning the lesson again and again. It's going to be quite ugly this time. The impeachment opened Wednesday with a couple of key witnesses, the U.S. State Department bureaucrat William Taylor and George Kent. It turned out that Jordan roasted the star witness Taylor right off the bat. Representative Jim Jordan was moved to the Intel Committee by House GOP leaders specifically to grill witnesses. He's extremely good at it, Louisa. Took his task to heart on Wednesday. He tore into acting Ukraine Ambassador William Taylor over his testimony on whether there were any linkages between withholding the funds and a public announcement of an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden. He noted that during the almost 2 months while U.S. aid to Ukraine was delayed, Taylor met with President Zelensky 3 times. The hold was never mentioned. There was no linkage, Jordan said. I can't believe that you are their star witness. You're their first witness. You are the guy. Taylor testified he first heard on July 18th that aid was being held up, and then it was released on September 11th. We know from your deposition in those 55 days that aid is delayed. You met with President Zelensky 3 times. The first on July 26th, the day after the infamous call. Zelensky meets you and Mr. Volkan and Mr. Sondland. And again, according to your deposition and your testimony, there was no linkage of security assistance to investigating Burisma or the Bidens. The questions came after Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, testified. His staff, get this, his staff told him they heard President Trump speaking to Sondland at a restaurant the day after Trump's July 25th phone call with Zelensky. I mean, Louisa, this is ridiculous. This is a staff member reporting what they overheard at a restaurant. Who knows what the context could have been or what the reference may have actually been.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
There was also a meeting on August 27th with Zelensky, Taylor, and then National Security Advisor John Bolton. Still no linkage. Then on September 5th, another meeting between the Ukrainian president, Senator Ron Johnson, and Chris Murphy. Still no linkage. Meanwhile, Devin Nunes' opening statement embarrasses the Democrats. Representative Devin Nunes embarrassed House Democrats during his opening statement at Wednesday morning's impeachment, claiming they are the last people on earth with the credibility to make accusations against their political opponents. His barbs were directed at Democrats as a whole, but also specifically targeting House Intel Committee Chair Adam Schiff. After referring to the Russia collision hoax as a pitiful 3-year-long operation by the Democrats to corrupt media and partisan bureaucrats to overturn the results of the 2016 presidential election, Nunes suggested the latest whistleblower hearings were nothing more than a sequel. After the spectacular implosion of the Russia hoax on July 24th, in which they spent years denouncing any Republican who ever shook hands with a Russian, on July 25th, they turned on a dime and now claim the real malfeasance is Republican dealing with Ukraine. Meanwhile, and this is fascinating, Schiff finally released his Tim Morrison testimony. He was the National Security Council senior director, blowing up the Ukraine hoax and destroying the credibility of the witness, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. The NSC senior director for European Affairs testified before the Schiff secret star chamber back in October, Louisa. The transcript was finally released this weekend. His testimony completely destroys the Democrats' latest attempt to remove Trump from office. Worse yet, it obliterates his chief witness and reported second whistleblower, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who's unreliable and who reports to Morrison. No wonder Schiff held his secret hearings behind closed doors in a basement. Schiff doesn't want the American public to know that President Trump's phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky was completely above board. Here are some key points of Morrison's testimony. Mr. Morrison did not believe anything improper occurred on the July 25th call. Mr. Morrison testified the memorandum of conversation, a phrase used to describe the call transcript of the July 25th call, was complete and accurate. Mr. Morrison, who listened to the July 25th call, testified he was not concerned about the substance of what was discussed on the call, only that the transcript might leak. Mr. Morrison was told by National Security Council lawyer John Eisenberg that the July 25th call record mistakenly ended up on the highly classified system, debunking the Democrats' allegations of an attempted cover-up. Mr. Morrison repeatedly testified he purposely kept Lieutenant Colonel Vindman out of the loop on this matter because he had concerns about Vindman's judgment, which were also raised to him by Fiona Hill and others. Mr. Morrison testified that as the final clearing authority for any edits made to the 725 call package, he accepted all of Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's proposed edits. Mr. Morrison testified he does not believe Burisma came up on the call or that anyone suggested edits to the MEMCON to include the word Burisma. Mr. Morrison testified Lieutenant Colonel Vindman relayed two concerns to him about the July 25th call, that it did not get into the subject matter they'd hoped and the fidelity of the translation. Mr. Morrison testified Lieutenant Colonel Vindman never reported to Morrison any of the light queries that he received from Ukrainian officials in August regarding the hold on aid. Mr. Morrison confirmed that President Trump generally does not like foreign aid and specifically held concerns that corruption in Ukraine may cause U.S. aid to be misused. This should end the Democrats' impeachment hearings. There was no crime. There is no crime. But Democrats continue to lie to the people about their sham investigation. And of course, it will not end. Louisa, your thoughts?
Sorry, Jim. Yeah. This is a sham, and they're trying to change the laws as they're going along. They're trying to redefine, actually you have Nancy Pelosi now saying that the president has to prove his innocence. So we have thrown the presumption of innocence out the window now. This is, it's so desperate. I hope people are really, I would really love for our viewers to comment in the comment section and tell us what you think. I mean, is it as obvious to everybody else as it is to us? That's really what I want to know.
I think you got it right, Louisa. Meanwhile, Yovanovitch admits she knew nothing about Biden. She knew about Biden and Burisma, but nevertheless did nothing. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Maria Yovanovitch, admitted Friday under questioning from Republican counsel she'd been briefed about the fact Hunter Biden was on Burisma's board, but did nothing about it. Hunter Biden, one of then Vice President Joe Biden's children, was named to a highly compensated board position in 2014 while his father was overseeing U.S.-Ukraine relations, a situation diplomat George Kent testified Wednesday presented a clear conflict of interest. Yovanovitch testified in response to questions from Stephen Castor before the House Intel Committee's second public hearing. She had been informed of the situation in her briefing documents for a confirmation hearing and had even been coached on how to respond, but took no action when she arrived at her post. Here's Castor. Right around the time the bribe was paid by an oligarch, Burisma undertook an effort to spruce up their board. They added, I believe, the president of Poland and some other luminaries. Are you familiar with that? Yovanovitch, yeah. I don't exactly know what the timing of all this was, but yes, I mean, to the elements. Castor. And, you know, one of the folks they added to the board was the vice president's son, Hunter Biden, which, you know, raises question. Is he a genius on the corporate governance front? Is he a genius with the oligarchical systems and cleaning that up? Or was he just added to the board because he's the vice president's son? Was that ever, you know, a concern, or at least a perception of that concern addressed? Yovanovitch, as I said, I arrived in August of 2016, several months before the elections and before Trump took office. It was not a focus of what I was doing in that 6-month period. Castor, okay. Was the issue ever raised at all? Yovanovitch, you know, not Castor. He was still on the board, I think, at the time. Yovanovitch. My understanding from newspaper accounts is he just recently left in 2019. I never met him, never talked to him. I'm sorry, what was your question? Castor, he was still on the board when you arrived at post. I was wondering if at least a perception problem was brought to your attention as the ambassador. Yovanovitch, I was aware of it because, as I told you before, in the deposition there had been in terms of preparation for my Senate confirmation hearings for Ukraine, there was a question about that and a select answer. So I was aware of it, yes. Representative Elaine Stefanik later noted that while Democrats on the committee had tried to suppress questions about Burisma, the Obama administration itself had prepared her to answer them for her confirmation hearing. Stefanik, the first time you personally became aware Burisma was actually when you were being prepared by the Obama State Department for your Senate confirmation hearings. And this was in the form of practice questions and answers. This was in your deposition. And you testified that in this particular practice Q&A with the Obama State Department, it wasn't just generally about Burisma and corruption. It was specifically about Hunter Biden and Burisma. Is that correct? Yovanovitch, yes, it is. Stefanik, and the exact quote from your testimony, Ambassador, is, quote, the way the question was phrased in this model Q&A was, what can you tell us about Hunter Biden's, being named to the board of Burisma? So for the millions of Americans watching, President Obama's own State Department was so concerned about potential conflicts of interest from Hunter Biden's role at Burisma that they raised it themselves while prepping this wonderful ambassador nominee before confirmation. And yet our Democratic colleagues and the chairman of this committee cry foul when we dare ask that same question the Obama administration was so concerned about. But we will continue asking it. Meanwhile, and this is utterly fascinating, star witnesses stared straight ahead with a blank look. Trump gloat, slam, shifty shifts, impeachment, show trial, disaster. Representative John Ratcliffe, story to Adam Schiff's top witnesses on Wednesday. Representative Ratcliffe, a former U.S. attorney from Texas, destroyed the Democrats' pre-audition star witnesses. At one point, Ratcliffe asked Ambassador Taylor and George Kent to name the crime that President Trump committed on his call with President Zelensky. Representative Ratcliffe. So in this impeachment hearing today, where we impeach presidents for treason or bribery or other high crimes, where is the impeachable offense in that call? Are either of you here today to assert there was an impeachable offense in that call? Silence. They sat in silence. They could not answer. It was devastating. At that moment, the Schiff show trial was exposed. Meanwhile, on other fronts, Roger Stone has been found guilty of all 7 charges brought by the Mueller probe. Longtime political operative Roger Stone, who, by the way, although we're not close, we are friends, has been found guilty on all 7 counts of his indictment brought by Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation, charges including false statements to Congress, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering, all related to statements about his effort to contact WikiLeaks. Prosecutors allege Stone lied to Congress about his conversation with WikiLeaks during a New York radio interview with comedian Randy Credico, who scored an interview with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in 2016 when he was avoiding a prosecution by sheltering in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and conservative writer and conspiracy theorist Jerome Corsi. During the 2016 campaign, Stone had mentioned in interviews and public appearances that he was in contact with Assange through a trusted intermediary and hinted at inside knowledge of WikiLeaks' plan. But he started pressing Credico to broker a contact, and Credico testified he told Stone to work through his own intermediary. Earlier testimony revealed that Stone, while appearing before the House Intel Committee, named Credico as his intermediary to Assange and pressured Credico not to contradict him. After Credico was contacted by Congress, he reached out to Stone, who told him he should stonewall it and plead the Fifth. Credico also testified during Stone's trial that Stone repeatedly told him to do a Frank Pengali, a reference to a character in The Godfather, Part 2, Lies Before Congress. Prosecutors said Stone had also threatened Credico's therapy dog, Bianca, saying he was going to take that dog away from you. Louisa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm muted. I thought it was, look, their star witness, the ambassador, was not privy to the phone call, was not privy to, never met the president, and here is their star witness, which, it's a farce. It's just, Jim, this is political theater. Like, you coined this term. This is exactly what it describes. In terms of Roger Stone, there's a report saying that big things are going to drop right after the announcement of Stone's indictment. In fact, it was Benjamin Fulford who reported that today. And he reported something else you're going to like, but I'll wait until you get to that topic.
You mean Stone's conviction, which of
yes.
course has now just taken place.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Meanwhile, insider leak is Facebook protecting alleged whistleblower Eric Caramella. An individual working for Cognizant, a Facebook contractor, has come forward to disclose what they claim is a censorship campaign regarding alleged whistleblower Eric Caramella. Cognizant first made headlines earlier this year when an article by The Verge entitled The Secret Life of Facebook Moderators in America was published. The article disclosed the existence of thousands of human content moderators who are being employed by Facebook to climb through content manually. Here's an excerpt from the article. Over the past 3 months, I interviewed a dozen current and former employees of Cognizant in Phoenix. All had signed non-disclosure agreements with Cognizant in which they pledged not to discuss their work for Facebook or even acknowledge that Facebook is Cognizant's client. The shroud of secrecy is meant to protect employees from users who may be angry about a content moderation decision and seek to resolve it with a known Facebook contractor. The NDAs are also meant to prevent contractors from sharing Facebook users' personal information with the outside world at a time of intense scrutiny over data privacy issues. But the secrecy also insulates Cognizant and Facebook from criticism about their working conditions, moderators told me. The individual coming forward provided a picture of their work ID to show they are an employee of Cognizant and thus would be aware of internal Facebook content moderator and censorship requests. Individual Facebook inside leak. Today I was contacted by a person who works for Cognizant, a Facebook subcontractor. The following is a series of lightly redacted screenshots numbered in order and overlapping to show full conversation. I have compiled the information the source provided. I want to stress At the time of publishing, the information had not been verified 100%. The source wishes to remain anonymous and was limited in what we were able to disclose. Meanwhile, Democrats want to keep CIA leaker Eric Caramella anonymous till after the impeachment. Then he'll be the toast of DC, do all the talk shows, land a huge book deal. Let's be clear. There's only one reason Democrats want the anti-Trump CIA leaker to remain anonymous. They know the more you learn about Caramella, the more likely they lose. Work with DNC operative Alexandria Chalupa and the creation of the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Fired from the NSC in 2017 for leaks and returned to the CIA. Worked directly for James Clapper. Worked and traveled with Joe Biden. Served in the Obama administration. Worked with John Brennan. Is a registered Democrat. Sounds like a great source for this complaint to me, Louisa. CIA snitch Eric Caramella filed a whistleblower complaint on August 12th over President Trump's July 25th phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, where the two discussed ferreting out corruption. This included talk on investigating the Biden crime family. Caramella was not on the call. He just heard about it, and his report was filled with inaccuracy. Meanwhile, it's not going over well even with other Democrats. Democrat representative says he'll vote no on impeachment, reveals other Democrat lawmakers are quietly, privately concerned about the Schiff show trial. Democrat Representative Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey appeared on Sunday Morning Futures on Sunday and told host Maria Bartiromo that he would be voting no on impeachment unless there's proof Trump had committed a high crime. Congressman Van Drew voted against the impeachment resolution that denies President Trump due process and gives Adam Schiff sweeping powers to control witnesses and evidence. Van Drew said that impeachment is a very serious thing, and Schiff is disenfranchising millions upon millions of Americans who voted for Trump. Our founding fathers had vigorous debates on whether they would even allow impeachment in the Constitution. You don't disenfranchise voters. Millions upon millions of voters, Van Drew said. Voters choose their leaders in America. Marie Bartiromo then asked Representative Van Drew if he is hearing concern from red state Democrats about Schiff's Soviet-style impeachment process. There is some discussion among some of them, Democrats privately, quietly, of concern, certainly. What I'm hearing out in the street from most people is they're kind of tired, they're kind of worn out, they're kind of bored, and they really want to move on. And here we have a tweet about the congressman. Democrats losing their appetite for impeachment. They're no longer, that Democrats are concerned about the impeachment push. I imagine I'll be voting no unless there's something new. And here, of course, we see a cartoon that captures exactly what's going on. Adam Schiff is the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Louisa.
Absolutely, Jim. Absolutely. It's very sad to see our country come to this. It's very obvious that there is a process here. He can't, like they said, disenfranchise all the people who voted for Trump. He doesn't have that kind of fell swoop power, and he's trying to change the rules and laws as he goes because it's fake. It's all fake. So, and again, Jim, they're going to need, if they want to remove the president, they need 63 votes in the Senate. They know they're not going to get it. They're not even going to get it in the House, which wouldn't result in removal anyway. It's a waste of time. So they're right in abandoning this. They're not going to get it because, as that representative said, there needs to be evidence that the president did something. They've not presented anything but hyperbole. That's it.
You got it right, Louisa. You got it exactly right. Meanwhile, this is fascinating. Stop the coup. Judicial Watch Hugh Hewitt call on the Senate to reject the partisan impeachment of Trump by not holding a trial. Judicial Watch and Hugh Hewitt have made respective calls to the Senate to reject out of hand any articles of impeachment against President Trump the Democrat House sends to the upper chamber because of the secret partisan way in which the Democrats have conducted the impeachment investigation. Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch president, appeared in a Judicial Watch video posted Monday urging phone calls to the Senate, demanding senators reject any impeachment articles. I would suggest you call your senators at 202-224-3121 to shut down the impeachment. They can dismiss it out of hand. They should be telling the House right now that they're not going to buy into an abusive coup attack on real Donald Trump. Appearing on NBC's Meet the Press, you would observe the Ukraine controversy is in part based on disagreement with Trump using a back channel to Ukraine, Hugh Hewitt. I've read those stories. I imagine it would be Rudy Giuliani, a sacrificial lamb, but I'm doing my best to read all the transcripts, and I have enormous respect for the Department of State. People know my son works there, and Mike Pompeo is a good friend of mine. So I'm trying to be very respectful of them. But what I see, I don't see any impeachable offense in the record so far. I don't even see an offense. I see a back channel. The State Department has hated since Harry Hopkins went to England for FDR in 1934 and 1940, since Scali was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis, since Kissinger went to China. The State Department hates back channels, and when they blow up like Iran-Contra, they blow up badly. But there's nothing illegal. It's a policy dispute. And so we're on the verge of the very first partisan impeachment since 1868. I don't think the American people like this at all, this purely partisan vote in the House. That's what we're going to have. In the first two impeachments, there were a concrete act, a break-in, an affair at a White House with an intern on which you had a date, time stamp, a time. American people understood. Not only is that not here, there's a compelling argument that what the president did is just what other presidents do. And I am persuaded by this. I don't think the Senate, there will be an impeachment. They're going to send an article over a purely partisan vote. I don't think the Senate should take it up. I think they should reject the motion to proceed and never touch it. Otherwise, we have this done again and again, secret trials, secret hearings, ex parte contact, just a bad precedent. Hewitt detailed in a Washington Post column Sunday how the Senate could reject the articles of impeachment without holding a trial. He cited research by former Secretary of the Senate, Kelly Johnstone, who's also worked for Republicans in this Senate. Johnstone said that a critical moment will arise as soon as any articles arrive in the Senate, but before any substantive proceedings occur. Under the standing rules of the Senate must approve a motion to proceed to consider the articles. It is at that moment that senators, even and especially those critical of Trump for other reasons, should think of a future littered with partisan impeachments born of secret proceedings and abuse of the House minority's rights, as well as the rights of future presidents. Johnston imagined a scenario in which McConnell offered a measure to move forward, either with a full trial or something shorter, and a senator from either party objected. That would be McConnell's cue to shut the entire thing down. Under the rules, there would be unlimited debate until the leader files a cloture motion, he explained. That triggers an additional 30 hours culminating in a vote. As you know, other than nominations, it takes 60 votes to end debate, even though it takes just 51 to adopt a motion to proceed. With 51 votes in the Reid rule, Johnson continued, McConnell could first block the filibuster on any motion to proceed and then move to dismiss any article of impeachment with a simple majority. This process, the refusal by the Senate to approve a motion to proceed, is how the Senate should flush articles of impeachment from the record as it stands today. Invite the House to begin again if it wants, but using due process if it does, and backed by a bipartisan majority. Also on Sunday, Senator Lindsey Graham, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said that articles of impeachment would be invalid and dead on arrival in the Senate if the alleged whistleblower is kept secret and does not testify before the House. I consider any impeachment in the House that doesn't allow us to know who the whistleblower is to be invalid, because without the whistleblower complaint, we wouldn't be talking about any of this, Graham told Fox News Sunday Morning Futures, saying the process would be unfair if the person who brought the complaint in the first place does not have to face questioning. I consider any impeachment in the House that doesn't allow us to know who the whistleblower is to be invalid, because without the whistleblower complaint, we wouldn't be talking about any of this, stating the process would be unfair if the person who filed the complaint does not have to face questioning. Meanwhile, Carl Bernstein, America in a cold civil war. America is in the middle of a cold civil war. The public impeachment hearings into President as the president and as the public impeachment hearings into President Donald Trump move forward, everything is going to be judged politically in that context. According to Watergate journalist Carl Bernstein, who added, "We all need to take a step back. We have some overwhelming evidence that the President of the United States conspired with his lawyer to undermine the electoral process in this country through the intervention of a foreign power," Bernstein told CNN. "It's a very grave charge, and there are lots of facts that support that charge, which I don't believe for an instant. But nobody knows where the charges will go, and much of it will have to do with how Americans process information being presented, how the Senate will look at the testimony," Bernstein said. "The conventional wisdom is he'd be acquitted the president in the Senate. I think it's time to put conventional wisdom aside. We don't know. Senators are very sensitive to the will of the people, and if the people in this country turn on these facts and this president, I think the Senate might as well. They understand the Constitution talks about at least two specific high crimes, bribery and treason. This is bribery. And the facts show so far real evidence that the president tried to bribe the president of another foreign country to intervene in our election. That is a high crime." Bernstein added that if impeachment proceedings were held now in the Republican-controlled Senate, sure, he would be acquitted. "These senators are also looking at the president's mental state," said Bernstein. "There is concern among these senators about his temperament, his stability. It's no secret to any of us who talk to people in the Senate. And that dynamic, too, goes to the people of the United States." Embarrassingly bad, complete nonsense, Louisa.
Well, Jim,
He's been talking too much to Mitt Romney.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what I've read are reports that Watergate was really about covering up the child trafficking. That's really what that was about. And the Pizzagate kind of thing. So, from a guy who's obviously, if he's a reporter and didn't report that, then he's not a real reporter. And clearly he's not, because he's making statements where he hasn't seen any evidence himself that there was any wrongdoing by the president. It's just a narrative they're trying to push, but there's no evidence. You see, there's no evidence that the president did anything inappropriate. So I think that guy needs to retire and get off the airwaves because he's useless.
I used to admire Carl Bernstein, but knew no longer. He's just turned into another political hack. Yeah. Not only can they not get him on anything related to the Ukraine phone call, but the Trump effect, as Dr. Ewan has reported, America's 50 safest cities, there are all kinds of consequences of his policies that are benefiting the American people. Yesterday, I did a post on the good news, ignored by the mainstream media, that in 2018, the United States had nearly the lowest violent crime rate in more than 3 decades, as far back as many Americans can remember, of 369 violent crimes reported for every 100,000 Americans. Violent crime rate is a population-adjusted measure of incidents of rape, robbery, homicide, and aggravated assault. A message for millennials. John Roman, a senior fellow at Social Research Institute, NORC, at the University of Chicago, said, "If you are under the age of 40, you've never been safer than you are today." Meanwhile, it turns out that Obama deported nearly 2 million in the first 3 years of his presidency, while Trump has deported fewer than 800,000. The latest immigration enforcement data affirms something that would appear incongruous. Former President Barack Obama deported illegal aliens at a far higher rate than his successor. Roughly 1.8 million foreign nationals were deported from the U.S. for the first 3 years of the Obama administration. The Trump administration, on the other hand, has deported fewer than 800,000 so far, according to a report from the Washington Post. In 2012 alone, Obama oversaw the removal of nearly 410,000 people. Trump has yet to deport more than 260,000 in a single year. While the numbers seem like an anomaly given the Trump administration laser focus on immigration control, they largely reflect the demographics of the current border crisis. During the Obama administration, a much higher proportion of those apprehended at the southern border were Mexican nationals, who are far easier to remove from the country than foreign nationals from non-contiguous countries. The current immigration crisis has been largely made up of family units from Central America. Children and families from countries other than Canada or Mexico are much more difficult to process and remove because of US immigration laws. The immigration crisis has also forced the Trump administration to divert DHS resources to the US-Mexico border, leaving the interior with less manpower. The result has been fewer deportations. However, retainment of foreign nationals has reached record levels. Roughly 50,000 individuals were jailed on any given day last year by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the highest detainment number in the government's history. Individuals are also being held for a longer duration than before. Immigration activists who once referred to Obama as the deporter-in-chief have not forgotten the 44th deportation record. What that means is Trump can't be defeated because he's making progress on so many fronts. And here we have the report from Natural News. President Trump makes unscheduled stop at military hospital to undergo battery of tests for possible deliberate poisoning of food with time-delayed chemical agent. Food tester gravely ill from a White House-connected source. A medical staff at Walter Reed did not get a staff-wide notice about a presidential visit ahead of Trump's arrival. Typically, Walter Reed staff would have a general notice about a VIP visit ahead of a presidential arrival, notifying them of certain closures at the facility. That did not happen this time, indicating the visit was a non-routine and scheduled at the last minute. It was initiated by the sudden onset of symptoms experienced by the president's food tester, who was reported stricken with such severe symptoms that urgent medical tests were conducted on him while the president was diverted to Walter Reed for a priority medical examination involving a battery of chemical tests. The president's motorcade drove to the medical center unannounced, with reporters under direction not to mention his movement until they arrived Saturday at Walter Reed. A separate source familiar with the situation described Trump's visit as abnormal, but added that Trump, 73, appeared to be in good health late Friday. Alex Jones told Natural News he believes the incident may have been a deep state attack using an exotic chemical poison with a delayed activation signature. He underscored the importance of people understanding we're in a climate of civil war, and this kind of attempted poisoning is par for the course, historically speaking, when they want to take out a leader to make it appear to be death by natural causes. InfoWars had previously reported that Roger Stone survived an attempted poisoning, and that deep state operatives who had infiltrated the White House were poisoning the president's water in an effort to impair his cognitive function and energy. In 2018, a U.S. Secret Service agent traveling with President Trump in Scotland died from a stroke, USA Today reported. A Secret Service agent traveling as part of President Trump's security detail died Tuesday in Scotland after suffering a severe stroke. The agent, a 19-year veteran of the agency, suffered the stroke on Sunday and was treated in Scotland. InfoWars' Millie Weaver reported today, however, that the U.S. Secret Service agent who died from a stroke was also a food tester. He was reportedly in good health before his sudden death. This is how power behind the scene always tries to take people out very quietly so they don't become martyrs, explained Alex Jones during his InfoWars broadcast. It's common knowledge there have been multiple attempts on the president's life. Alex Jones doing a good job here. To carry out chemical poisoning operation, deep state operatives have access to a vast array of chemical poison with a wide variety of biochemical mechanisms. And the fact that Democrats' attempted impeachment is rapidly collapsing, combined with the extremely disappointing lineup of Democratic candidates, may have motivated anti-Trump deep state operatives to escalate the war to the level of an attempted assassination. It's becoming increasingly apparent to all Americans that Democrats and the deep state work in concert, and they abide by no laws, ethics, or morality. There's nothing they won't do, it seems, to destroy the president and seize power, even if it means carrying out a chemical assassination. The entire impeachment fiasco is a deep state's attempt to overturn the will of the American voter and install their own leader who will protect the deep state rather than expose it. You don't want to assassinate Trump because it turns him into a martyr, Alex Jones explained about the deep state methods. So you kill him slowly and drug him with chemicals to make him act loopy, so you can remove him via the 25th Amendment. This episode follows President Trump's recent activation of U.S. Marine Reserve units as part of an urgent deployment that specifically named an emergency within the United States and ordered units to be ready to be activated in response to threats in the homeland that will come with little or no warning. Actual language from the order. Louisa, I believe this was in fact a real attempt.
Yeah, as I was reporting, and sadly, there's been numerous other attempts that GoldFish Report has reported on as well. So, look, it's part of the business. You know, the president's well protected, though, and you know they're just more unaware, on alert now. But you know, Alex Jones, you know, is right in that, you know, taking him down is not going to stop the agenda of what's happening, and they're not going to succeed at it anyway. I mean, he's very well protected and very smart to have that food tester test the food before. It's sad for the family of those people, though. But
well, you notice how clever it is to have a delayed chemical reaction, because
sure.
that means it gets past the food tester. It looks initially as though it's okay.
Yeah.
And only then does it show up. Meanwhile, Google has gone all in. This is absolutely stunning. Google whistleblower Zach Voorhees has released 950 pages of Google documents that paint a comprehensive picture of how Google is manipulating public opinion in the political landscape. Changes at Google first became noticeable in 2016 after Trump was elected president. Voorhees later discovered evidence suggesting Google was playing a role in the effort to remove Trump from office. Machine learning fairness is a Google project that replaces unfair search results, even when the unfairness is accurately reflecting worldly reality, with more fair and balanced search results, thereby artificially altering what people perceive as reality. Google tools such as autofill search recommendations can be used to sway public opinion on political and other topics, which can have significant political consequences. Research shows biased search rankings can shift voter preference of undecided voters by 20% or more, and the people will be completely unaware that they have been manipulated. In this interview, Zach Voorhees, who worked as a senior software engineer at Google and YouTube for over 8 years, shares his inside knowledge of the global monopoly, revealing why Google is no longer a reliable source of information. Google's monopoly over search is matched by continued reassurance it's an unbiased search program. Google is actively suppressing and censoring information, proving it is anything but unbiased. While some of the information revealed is related to politics, you can read about my views of the two-party U.S. system here. The point of sharing this information is that Google is manipulating search results to reflect its views and to influence our social behavior while denying this is happening. The Wall Street Journal just published a thorough investigation covering these same points. Voorhees recently released about 950 pages of internal Google documents that paint a comprehensive picture of what's really going on. You can find all those documents on the Project Veritas website. Meanwhile, a new poll, Americans struggle to identify true facts. Hardly any surprise. In a sharply divided country, Americans still agree it's hard to know what's a true and honest fact. Washington. A new poll from the Associated Press, NORC Center for Public Affairs Research, and USA Facts finds that regardless of political belief, many Americans say they're having a hard time figuring out if information is true. Nearly 2/3 of Americans say they often come across one-sided information. About 6 in 10 say they regularly see conflicting reports about the same set of facts from different sources. It's difficult to get facts. You have to read between the lines. You have to have a lot of common sense, said Lee Williams, 29, of Modesto, California. On Republicans, Williams says she relies on like-minded friends and family to help sort through conflicting information. There are wolves in sheep's clothing everywhere. The poll found 47% of Americans believe it's difficult to know if the information they encounter is true, compared with 31% who finds it easy. When deciding whether something is factual, there's widespread consensus on the importance of transparency and how the information was gathered, and if it's based on data. Democrats and Republicans alike frequently find the process challenging. Meanwhile, mandatory vaccines, climate change, open borders, gun seizures, impeachment of the president, all part of the New World Order's enforced population reduction. America is Agenda 21 elite's #1 target. Let's put all the cards on the table. Vaccines are the elite's primary tool used to modify people to accept the craziness of world government. Got that? Most Americans have figured out that had we elected Hillary as president, by now, most Americans, adults and children, would have been forcibly yanked out of their homes and or vehicles, thrown on the ground and vaccinated with a full complement of CDC recommended vaccines, 74 for children, 92 for adults. She'd been using UN troops, probably Chinese, to get that done. After all, the elites would surmise, why not make the whole US population as dingy and useless as the over-vaccinated millennials? See the short but humorous video below to see what I mean. Louisa.
Yeah, I'm muted. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that we would definitely be seeing forced vaccination where we would see microchipping. We would probably all be ushered into FEMA camps by now, Jim, if she was elected. And plus, I just wanted to make a comment, just to revise the comment I was making on that reporter. What's his name? The one that you just reported about?
Voorhees?
No, the other one. I was just saying that his opinion was worthless if he's going to be spouting out fake news, saying that there's ample evidence that the president did something when there was actually nothing. There was no evidence.
Carl Bernstein.
Bernstein. He needs to retire. He's old. He's had his day. He had his chance.
Yep.
And if he's going to talk fake news, then he's not a real reporter in my opinion.
Well, he's appearing on CNN, which is by far more biased than MSNBC.
There you have it.
He's clearly a shill.
Yep.
Inconvenient truth, alarming things we have learned under Trump, but not always about him. Almost daily for 3 years, Democrats and the media have told us very bad things about Donald Trump's life, character, and presidency. Some of them are true. But in the process, we have also learned some lamentable, even alarming things about the Democratic Party establishment, including self-professed liberals. Consider the following. The Democratic establishment is deeply and widely imbued with rancid Russophobia attitudes. Most telling was and remains a core Russiagate allegation that Russia attacked American democracy during the 2016 presidential election on Trump's behalf, an attack so nefarious it has often been equated with Pearl Harbor. But there was no attack in 2016. Only ritualistic meddling of the kind that both Russia and Americans have undertaken in each other's elections for decades. Life can be more phobic than the allegation or belief that one has been attacked by a hostile entity, and yet this myth and its false narrative persist in the Democratic Party's discourse, campaigning, and fundraising. We have also learned that the head of the American intelligence agencies under President Obama, especially John Brennan of the CIA and James Clapper, Director of National Intelligence, felt themselves entitled to try to undermine an American presidential candidacy and subsequent presidency, that of Donald Trump. Earlier on, this Operation Intelligate has been termed, and since it's been well documented by other writers, including Lee Smith in his new book, Intel officials did so, in fact, in tacit alliance with certain leading and equally Russophobic members of the Democratic Party, which had once opposed such transgressions. This may be the most alarming revelation of the Trump's years. Trump will leave power, but these self-aggrandizing intelligence agencies will remain. We also learned that contrary to Democratic dogma, the mainstream free press cannot be fully trusted to readily expose such abuses of power. Indeed, but the mainstream media, leading national newspapers and two cable news networks in particular, obviously CNN and MSNBC, choose to cover and report or choose not to cover and report, made the abuses and consequences of Russiagate allegations possible. Even now, exceedingly influential publications like the New York Times seem eager to delegitimize the investigation by Attorney General William Barr and his appointed special investigator John Durham into the origins of Russiagate. Barr's critics accuse him of fabricating a conspiracy theory on behalf of Trump. But the real or grandest conspiracy theory was a Russiagate allegation, a collusion between Trump and the Kremlin, an allegation that was or should have been discredited by the Robert Mueller report. And we have learned or should have learned that for all the talk by Democrats about Trump as a danger to U.S. national security, it is their Russiagate allegation that truly endanger it. Consider two examples. Russia's new hypersonic missiles, which can elude U.S. missile defense system, make new nuclear arms negotiation with Moscow imperative and urgent. If only for the sake of his legacy, Trump is likely to want to do so. But even if he's able, will Trump be entrusted enough to conduct negotiations as successfully as did his predecessors in the White House, given the Putin puppet and Kremlin stooge accusations still being directed at him? Similarly, if confronted with a U.S. Russian-Cuban missile-like crisis, anywhere Washington and Moscow are currently eyeball to eyeball militarily, from the Baltic region in Ukraine to Syria, will Trump be as free politically as was President John F. Kennedy to resolve it without war? Here, too, there is an inconvenient truth. To the extent that Democrats any longer seriously discuss national security in the context of U.S.-Russian relations, it mostly involves vilifying both Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Recall also that previous presidents were free to negotiate with Russia's Soviet communist leaders, even encouraged to do so, whereas to demonize Putin as an anti-communist post-Soviet leader. The current state of U.S.-Russian relations is unprecedentedly dangerous, not only due to reasons cited here, a new Cold War fraught with the possibility of hot war. Whether President Trump serves 1 or 2 terms, he must be fully empowered to cope with the multiple possibilities of U.S.-Russia military confrontation. That requires ridding him and our nation of Russiagate allegations, and that in turn requires learning how those allegations originated. Opponents of Barr's investigation into the origins of Russiagate say it is impermissible or unprecedented to investigate the investigators. But the bipartisan church committee based in the U.S. Senate did so in the mid-1970s. It exposed many abuses by U.S. intel agencies, particularly the CIA, and adopted remedies that believe would be permanent. Clearly, they have not been. However well-intentioned Barr may be, he is Trump's attorney general and therefore not fully credible. As I have also argued repeatedly, a new church committee is urgently needed. It's time for honorable members of the Senate of both parties to do their duty. This is authored by Stephen Cohen, a professor at Princeton and NYU, is among the leading experts in the world on U.S.-Russia relations. Louisa.
No comment, Jim.
Cohen is a completely credible source. Meanwhile, after Evo, the lithium question looms large in Bolivia. It appears to me that just as we remain in Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is one of the world's largest lithium deposits, where lithium is used in computer components, triggers for nuclear weapons, and electric car batteries. It is exceeded only by a larger deposit in Bolivia, which I believe is almost certainly the heart of the matter. Why he was deposed. Bolivia's president, Evo Morales, was overthrown in a military coup on November 10th. He is now in Mexico. Before he left office, Morales was involved in a long project to bring economic and social democracy to his long exploited country. It's important to recall that Bolivia suffered a series of coups, often conducted by the military and the oligarchy on behalf of transnational mining companies. Initially, these were tin firms, but tin is no longer the main target in Bolivia. The main target is its massive deposits of lithium, crucial for the electric car. Over the past 13 years, Morales has tried to build a different relationship between his country and its resources. He has not wanted the resources to benefit the transnational mining firms, but rather to benefit his own people. Part of that promise was met as Bolivia's poverty rate has declined and Bolivia's population was able to improve its social indicators. Nationalization of resources combined with the use of its income to fund social development has played a role. The attitude of the Morales government toward the transnational firms produced a harsh response from them, many taking Bolivia to court. Over the course of the past few years, Bolivia has struggled to raise investment to develop the lithium reserves in a way that brings the wealth back into the country for its people. Morales' vice president, Alvaro Garcia Linera, has said that lithium is a fuel that will feed the world. Bolivia was unable to make deals with Western transnational firms. It decided to partner with Chinese. This made the Morales government vulnerable. It had walked into the new Cold War between the West and China. The coup against Morales cannot be understood without a glance at this clash. Meanwhile, Pentagon claims U.S. authority to shoot any Syrian government official who tries to take control of Syrian oil. Think about that. Pentagon officials asserted Thursday U.S. military authority over Syrian oil fields because U.S. forces are acting under the goal of protecting Americans from terrorist activity and would be within their rights to shoot a representative of the Syrian government who attempted to retake control of that country's own national resource. The comments came from Pentagon spokesman Jonathan Hoffman and Navy Rear Admiral William Byrd Jr. during a press briefing in which the two men were asked repeatedly about the legal basis for the U.S. claiming to control the Syrian oil fields. Meanwhile, from antiwar.com, Pentagon's East Syrian operation about more than taking the oil. U.S. main focus is to keep Syria out by force. Whether to control the oil or flat out take the oil, U.S. statements on the new military mission in Syria are heavily oil themed. Other reports, however, suggest the operation is a lot more complicated. In reality, a lot of the goal is nation building, with U.S. forces built to both keep the Syrian government out of this part of Syria and try to bring prosperity to the region, propping up a potential territory for rebels. This is again built around the assumption the U.S. can manufacture an autonomous, prosperous region using the oil fields as a revenue source and then steer that region toward hostility with the rest of Syria, which is highly improbable. This will likely end up being a plan easier for the Trump administration to sell than overt theft of oil, as it allows the U.S. to retain its primary focus, military hostility towards Syria, with an eye toward eventual regime change. Toward that end, the U.S. keeps condemning Syria and Russia for airstrikes in the Idlib province of northwestern Syria and is demanding a full halt to strikes to resolve the situation through the UN. Ironically, the U.S. has also opposed the UN reconciliation process because it's not going to end with regime change. Pentagon officials are also pointing their military presence in Syria implies U.S. military authority to open fire on Syrian government representatives should any try to reclaim control over the Syrian oil fields. What they're trying to create is this new region called Free Pakistan. This is a new map of the Middle East by Colonel Ralph Peters, published in 2006, of remaking the Middle East. But it's at the cost of Syria, Iraq, in a part of Persia, Iran, that this would take place. All outrageous, but that appears to explain what's actually going on. Meanwhile, Erdogan, Turkey won't leave Syria until every other country does. Turkish President Erdogan just announced that Turkish military will not withdraw from Syria until every single other nation involved in the country in any way does so first, adding, "We will not let up until every last terrorist leaves the region." Erdogan is looking to establish Turkey's invasion as open-ended, and indeed, if they're insisting on being the last out, they're practically setting themselves up to be in Syria permanently. The talk of every last terrorist leaving is also open-ended because Turkey has made clear they view the Kurdish YPG as terrorists and are often willing to label anyone Kurdish who has a problem with Turkish military policy as terrorists as well, since Erdogan is all but certain to be pressed on the question of Turkey staying in Syria. During his visit to the U.S. this week, he seems to want to get his position out there before he arrives, although doing so is unlikely to change criticism of the policy, nor is it surprising Turkey intends to stay. Louisa, any comments?
Just what I had last week. Yeah, just what I had last week, Jim, and that was that if Syria was able to secure those oil fields themselves, we wouldn't need to be there. But because we had the manpower and military to kick ISIS out and take back control of that, it just seems like we're getting something for our efforts. What happens in the future remains to be seen. But right now, if Syria can take control of the safety and security of those oil fields, then it looks like there's a reciprocal relationship there. you know how long what how it develops from here remains to be seen, but it just seems like if we're going to go to the expense and risk our lives to put our soldiers there to take that back from ISIS, which is what we did, then it seems like we should benefit from that somehow. And of course the Syrian people should as well, but certainly not excluding them by any means. And that's the only comment that I have.
Well, the United States has a reputation for looting other countries for its natural resources.
Right, but we don't have neocons. Right, but we don't have neocons running the country now. We have Trump, and this is different. So let's see.
Meanwhile, Moscow sees U.S. comments on Israeli settlements as an attempt to undermine conflict resolution efforts between the Israelis and the Palestinians. On Monday, this was just yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Washington no longer regarded Israeli settlements in the West Bank as violating international law, reversing the Obama administration position and taking no legal position on the question or that of the Israeli occupation of the West Bank itself. The U.S. Russian Foreign Ministry stated Tuesday a recent statement by Mike Pompeo on the Israeli settlement is aimed at undermining the legal framework for conflict resolution. We see this decision of Washington as another step aimed at undermining the international legal base of the Middle Eastern settlement, which will promote aggravation of the already tense situation in the Palestinian-Israeli relations, the Russian Foreign Ministry said. Russia remains committed to the UN Security Council's Resolution 2334 of 2016, under which the presence of Jewish settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem is illegal and also an obstacle on the way to peace. We are calling insistently on all the parties involved to abstain from steps that may trigger new dangerous regional escalation and prevent creating conditions for resuming direct Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. The day before Pompeo announced the U.S. would repudiate its previous legal opinion on the status of the settlements. The U.S. will no longer adopt the position on the legality of the settlements, breaking with the Obama administration that they do violate international law, which is unquestionably the case. Since 1978, the legal advisor of the Department of State has regarded Israeli civilian settlements in the occupied territories as explicitly contravening the Fourth Geneva Convention. However, when President Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, he reversed that decision. Pompeo indicated Monday the U.S. was returning to the Reagan-era position. Louisa, any comment? Okay. Meanwhile, I'm profoundly disturbed that cancer cases have risen by over 300% in 1 year in India. Cases of common cancer, including oral, cervical, and breast cancer, diagnosed at state-run NCD clinics increased by nearly 324% between 2017 and 2018, according to a National Health Profile 2019 data. Although total number of people visiting the clinics also doubled between 2018 from 3.5 cohort to 6.6 cohort. Experts attributed the increased incidence of the disease to rapidly changing lifestyles, including stress, food habits, and consumption of tobacco products and alcohol, which I frankly regard as completely absurd. This proposed explanation is ridiculous. I do not believe any serious medical student would confirm that the changes in lifestyle would lead to a 324% increase in cancer during a single year. That's just ridiculous. What appears to be the case is that India is already using 5G technology. They're trying to conceal that by reporting that India should adopt the 5G technology, and some part of it should be developed indigenously, We should adopt 5G technology soon, as it will interconnect devices and accelerate data flow. That's supposed to be the idea of connecting your computer, your cell phone, your internet, your email, all in a single system. But in fact, these are death machines. A debate is underway on 5G technology. I'm aware of their view there's a need to develop some segment with Indian technology. Internet data in India is too cheap compared to other countries. Consumption is huge. Data consumption has seen a steep rise in the last 3 years. 5G technology will increase data flow and make people's lives easier, he said, but that's ridiculous as well. It's going to kill vast numbers of people. Even the New York Times is trying to convince us that there's no threat for 5G, which is a humongous deception. According to the Times, in 2000, the Broward County Public Schools in Florida received an alarming report. Like many affluent school districts at the time, Broward was considering laptops and wireless networks for its classrooms and 250,000 students. Were there any health risks to worry about? The district asked Bill P. Curry, a consultant and a physicist, to study the matter. The technology, he reported back, was likely to be a serious health hazard. He summarizes most troubling evidence in a large graph labeled microwave absorption in brain tissue, gray matter. The chart showed the dose of radiation received by the brain is rising from left to right with increasing frequency of the wireless signal. The scope was gentle at first, but when the line reached the wireless frequencies associated with computer networking, it shot straight up, indicating a dangerous level of exposure. This graph shows why I am concerned, Dr. Curry wrote. The body of his report detailed how the radio waves could sow brain cancer, a terrifying disease that kills most of its patients. Meanwhile, firefighters have reported neurological damage after cell tower installation near their station. The facts: following a cell tower installation on their fire station, firefighters were found to have abnormal brain chemistry. Reflect on why is this technology being rolled out with any appropriate biological safety testing first? If we already have reason to believe there are issues, shouldn't we test effectively first? The conversation about 5G within the mainstream is becoming quite concerning for onlookers, as there's been an increased awareness about the health concerns of wireless radiation. Sure, there are natural sources of electromagnetic radiation on both ends of the spectrum, but never before has humanity experienced this much. The main reason this is so concerning is because wireless radiation has biological effect, period. This is no longer a subject for debate when you look at PubMed and peer-reviewed literature. The effects are seen in all life forms, plants, animals, insects, microbes. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There's no question. We have evidence of DNA damage, cardiomyopathy, which is a precursor of congestive heart failure, neuropsychiatric effects. In the article, Dr. Sharon Goldberg, 5G small cell tower hearing in Michigan. You don't have to look hard to find the scientific research pertaining to wireless radiation, cell phones, electrical lines, etc. That being said, waiting for high levels of scientific and clinical proof before taking action to prevent well-known risks can lead to very high health and economic costs, as was the case with asbestos, lead in petrol, and tobacco. As Sharon Goldberg reports, if you can't expose humans to microwaves in a lab, in a controlled environment, if you can't even do that ethically because we have so much evidence of harm, then none of these technologies should be getting rolled out. This is illegal. Meanwhile, even Alex Jones is warning the dangers of 5G and the elite's plan to escape it. Alex Jones breaks down the dangers of ramping up harmful technologies like 5G, which need to be tested before they are released on the public. This is one of the good moves and contributions Alex Jones is making. Louisa, your thoughts?
Okay. As Benjamin Fulford reports often, he is talking about the inbred families, and I'm quoting from his report, who own most of the world's corporations and have been plotting to murder 90% of humanity and enslave the rest. That's why they've spent $6.4 trillion on war and mass murder, according to calculations by the Watson Institute. So since they orchestrated their 9/11 terror attacks and fascist coup d'etat. So there is a faction on the planet who, think about it, Jim, we've inhaled whatever's been in these chemtrails, right? These nanobots, these particles. A lot of people have the Morgellons disease. They have fibers. They have wire fibers coming out of their skin. That's, where does that come from? So then we all have these devices here, our little cell phones, right? Which can become accelerators. There could be particle accelerators in here. I've done a report from a military veteran who says that there's particle accelerators in here. So is this their plan, to use our cell phones to create some sort of mass genocide, mass extinction event? And we should be smart about it. And you're right. And I appreciate your reporting, because we have to ask these questions. But these are the people, what's it, Huawei company, who wanted to roll out the 5G. Are they part of the cabal? Are they part of the old guard system that's now losing power, control, and money? And are they trying to, accelerate their agenda for depopulation and swoop up as much money as they possibly can, because we are changing financial system and they're going to lose their money, their gravy train. So I think that's great reporting, Jim, and we all have to be very concerned that these cell phones aren't going to be our cause of death.
Well, Deagle, which is a highly connected military industrial intelligence agency organization, is projecting massive loss of U.S. population by 2025, down to 100 million, Louisa, when we have around 350 million today by 2025. They don't display that drop in Russia or in China, but in the West. So I'm terribly concerned that the 5G networks are going to be the primary killing mechanism for taking out American citizens over the next few years. Over the next few years, Louise, I mean, the time frame here is just stunning.
Well, Jim, one of the things that you pointed out in your report is the statistics regarding the females. I mean, this seems to be affecting the females so they can't reproduce. So this is not a coincidence, because according to, if you remember a while back, Jim, Popular Mechanics accidentally released or they reported that there was an accidental release of a FOIA request that contained leaked documents from the government that talked about electronics targeting of citizens, targeted individuals, and that they had a frequency that could stimulate different areas of the body. I mean, it's that specific. So it's targeting us folks. They're going to cook us, and everybody better get pretty mad about it.
Here's another highly significant report. Schools are already safe, and active shooter drills will traumatize millions, Princeton professor says. Mass killings at schools receive more media coverage than ever, but at the same time, schools are safer than they've ever been. Therefore, active shooter drills help no one and risk traumatizing children, one Princeton professor says. In response to an NPR article on discussing the potential psychological risks of realistic active shooter drills, Princeton sociology professor Patrick Sharkey was heavily critical of exercises that claim to prepare students to respond to threats. My hat is off to this guy. Here's a tweet. Our nation has decided to carry out a policy lockdown drills for students that will probably not help one single student and will periodically traumatize millions of students. We've done so at the time when schools are safer than they've ever been in decades. Despite high-profile media coverage, school shootings with multiple victims are still rare. The overall number of students killed in shootings at schools is down from the early 1990s to about 0.15 per million in 2014-2015, according to research at Northeastern University. One Harvard instructor estimated the likelihood of a public school student being killed by a gun in his school at about 1 in 614 million. Recently, active shooter preparation drills have evolved into more realistic simulations, including people dressed up as active shooters firing blank rounds inside schools. Not only is this potentially triggering or traumatizing for students, some experts believe it is unnecessary. And the analogy that I use is we don't light a fire in the hallway to practice fire drills. Melissa Reeves, a professor at Princeton University and former president of the National Association of School Psychologists, said, when we're teaching stranger danger, we don't put a child on a street corner and have someone grab them and scare them. We are able to teach these things through ways where we talk them through it and then we walk them through it and they respond accordingly. Nevertheless, in California, strictest gun seizure in U.S. approved by the California governor. Tune in, tweets Gavin Newsom as we sign 15 bills, including those focused on tackling the issue of ghost guns and strengthening our gun violence restraining orders and red flag laws to help prevent gun violence in California, even though it will have precisely the opposite effect. Newsom has reinforced a red flag law that enables educators, employers, and co-workers to inform on gun owners and request that a restraining order be placed on them if they are believed to be a danger to themselves or society, according to the AP. The bill was deemed to be too extreme even for Newsom's predecessor, former Governor Jerry Brown, who was also an enthusiastic advocate of gun control. Brown vetoed the legislation twice. Today's legislation also included a bill that would make these restraining orders last for up to 5 years. Judges may also issue search warrants when the restraining orders are mandated so that authorities may enter a private residence to seize guns. This is completely disgusting, Louisa. And as I have many times reported, gun ownership and homicide rates are inversely related. The more guns, the fewer homicides. Look at Chicago. How can this governor be such a moron that he can't look at Chicago and see that having strict gun laws doesn't work? Because Chicago has the highest gun violence in the nation. It's precisely the opposite, Louisa. This is a disgrace.
Yeah, Jim, this is exactly what I said when they announced there was going to be an active shooter drill in my my children's school. The first thing I said to the police was, when did we become Gaza? You know, I mean, and it's not Gaza's fault that they're under siege all the time. What I'm saying is that, you know, I absolutely said to them, this is going to traumatize the children, especially kids that have that are on the autism spectrum. This is so disruptive, and we know that there's 1 in 50 kids with autism today. So that's roughly half the population, right? So I mean, or I'm not, you know, stating a specific, a hard statistic here, but it's a very high number. So why do we need to traumatize these kids? I don't know, Jim, but you're absolutely right. And again, they just want the gun control laws because they're afraid we're going to use it on them. But Jim, I want to just to your credit, Jim, Fulford also mentioned something that I thought you would appreciate. And let me just mention this, that he did talk about how this is about a gun control effort, and to make this, let me just see something here. I want to be very careful. He was talking about recommendations to, you know, controlling the mainstream media, the corporations, the fake news and things like that. He said to make this succeed, all they need to do is take over the CIA and Mossad Mockingbird media operations that are responsible for so many fake news reports and scripted news events like Sandy Hook and the Boston Marathon bombing. So touche to you, my friend.
He's got it right. He's got it right. Thanks, Louisa. Meanwhile, the beat goes on. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley was deeply disturbed by Trump's Charlottesville remarks, she says in her new book. In a new book, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley condemned the president's remarks on the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville in 2017, where one person was reported to have died. Dozens were reported to have been left injured after a man drove his car into a crowd, except it was all staged. Haley, who resigned from her post in October 2018, wrote in her upcoming book, With All Due Respect, Defending America with Grit and Grace, that the president had initially called out the haters and made it clear they would not be tolerated. However, in a press conference the following day, Trump equivocated in response, saying there were some very bad people and very fine people on both sides, which of course is correct. The president's amended response prompted Haley to call the president and tell him to stop acknowledging the haters and understand the power of your voice. However, like Sandy Hook, Boston, Orlando, and Dallas. This is what I put up in comment on the article. Charlottesville was another false flag stage event. I have brought together experts on these and other cases orchestrated to instill fear into the public to make us more amenable to manipulation, to promote political policies that the people would otherwise not take seriously. The woman who played Susan Bro, the purported mother of Heather Heyer, also played the role of Donna Soto at Sandy Hook. It's all there between the pages of a single book. Check it out. These are so explosive and revealing that Amazon.com has now banned 6 of the 12 published by moonrockbooks.com. Don't be played. Meanwhile, Yoda, Posner versus Fetzer, a study in corrupt judgment. Fake law, Fetzer, Stone, Flynn, crooked judges, crooked prosecutors, ignorant juries, award juries should have refused to make any award, absent of having heard the full case. Judge should be removed from the bench for judicial malpractice and professional misconduct. See, he gives links. This is from Robert David Steele. Posner versus Fetzer, all legal documents free online. The Sandy Hook Posner versus Fetzer lawsuit, the basic documents. See especially Kevin Barrett, legal lynching, Stalinist show trial of Dr. James Fetzer, USMC, by a bad judge in Wisconsin. Robert Steele, Leonard Posner attempting to delete and make invisible all posts critical of the flawed legal reasoning in the Sandy Hook case. See also memoranda for president on Sandy Hook as female false flag, fake news, terrorist node. My book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. You can download it for free from the blog of Robert David Steele. A review of the book, a special Steele on false flags, Steele's affidavit for my lawsuit. Also related, the book by Sidney Powell, License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice, with Mike Flynn as the current victim of unethical prosecutors. Reveal, Griftopia, Bubble Machines, Vampire Squids, and the Long Con That's Breaking America. Review, The Divide, American Injustice in the Age of the Wealth Gap by Matt Tiabi. Meanwhile, my legal defense fund, they appear to be messing, interfering many ways. None of the money raised will be used to offset the absurd $450,000 verdict, but only to support the appeal that will set that award aside. In the trial, I have been denied to correct the record, expose Sandy Hook, and to the extent possible under these circumstances, restore respect for the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press. 100% of funds raised go to my attorney and my legal defense. You can even call me about it. If you want to send a check, make sure your letter is tracked, that you have a way of tracking it. I would suggest FedEx is an alternative, one way to do it. You can send checks to me, James H. Fetzer, Legal Defense Fund, 800 Violet Lane, Oregon, Wisconsin, 53575. Everyone whose donation I received receives a formal acknowledgement. So if you have made a donation but have not received a formal acknowledgement within, say, 10 days thereafter, though I've been away from home for 5 days and am catching up for a few that came in last week, reach out to me and let me know. You can email me, jim@moonrockbooks.com, jim@moonrockbooks.com. I'm grateful to everyone who's aiding and abetting, standing up with me in my fight for freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Louisa.
Thanks, Jim. I also wanted to make a point here that we had a viewer last week who wrote an email to me and regarding our Veterans Day GoldFish Report. And I'm only going to use her first name, Catherine. I want to thank you, Catherine. She brought to my attention an omission, and I wanted to go on the record and correct this, that we did not include the veterans of the U.S. Coast Guard. And she's absolutely right. And I'm standing corrected, and I did not intentionally, and she acknowledged it was an unintentional omission. I was thinking of our armed services, our armed forces, and I don't usually think of the Coast Guard as our armed forces, but they may be considered that. And of course, now we have the U.S. Space Force, so we're going to have to consider veterans of our Space Force. So forgive me for overlooking our beloved Coast Guards who have come to the rescue of so many people who were in peril at sea, and also protecting our international waters and boundaries from drug trafficking, human trafficking, and all the things that they have to do. So I want to put a personal note out. Thank you very much for all the service to all those who worked in the U.S. Coast Guard, who currently work in the U.S. Coast Guard. And we want to let you know that your service and sacrifice is also very much appreciated. I needed to just mention that, Jim. So Jim, thank you very much for this incredible report today. And
my great pleasure, Louisa.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're back. And of course, I'm traveling on the road and I'm not in my usual computer. So I'm hoping that this video is going to come out okay. I'm in a conference room in a library that is supposed to be quiet, but the ceiling's 20 feet high, so it echoes terribly and ironically. So hopefully I won't have too much feedback and echo in this. If it is, I'll have to edit it when I get home. But Jim, thanks again. I'll see you next week, my friend, regular time. Folks, we'll be back for another POTUS report next week. And we have started to monetize our channel, so just be aware that you will see commercials. And we are going to start super chats interviews very soon, which are live interviews with live chats where you can actually interact with the guests, and the super chats are donations. So this is for direct access to our guest, where you can ask questions and we can pay for the service. So thank you very much for your time, for all the people who help. If you want to make a donation to the GoldFish Report and help keep us going, and of course we have the road to the White House, which, you know, we have to get funded or we can't go back to the White House. So we have to do things like monetize and do super chats so that we can raise the funds to bring you the news firsthand, because we know that the mainstream media is fake news and they're not going to report the facts. So folks, go to the goldfishreport.com. There is a donate button there. I do appreciate your help. And we'll see everybody next week. Thanks again for viewing. And this concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report.